Yes, so many good ties. It's so good to be here. Always good to come back and spend time with you. And oh my goodness, it gets so emotional looking at all the faces, pieces of our story and pieces of our own journey of discipleship and call and all those things and relationships that have just meant so much to us over our journey into missions and what that's looked like over the years. This has been a big piece of that, and you have been a big piece of that and continue to be a big piece of that for us. So it is so good to come and connect with family here, actual family and spiritual family here as well. My family all says hi. They stayed in Winnipeg this weekend. We are a little bit crazy when we travel, and so try not to do too much crazy. And so I'm only here this morning, but Ruth says a big hello to everybody and our kids who are now ranging from the age of 18 all the way down to 2. And so we have lots of life and busyness at home and lots of fun with that, and also lots of hard stuff. So it's good. I see these kids, and we're busy, and it's really fun. So that's really good. I'm still continuing to work with Multiply. So that picture that you had up there before was when we were getting sent out to Turkey, where we spent about 6 years church planting there with a team who would include the Bergs from here as well, and spent some time doing that there. Now we're in Winnipeg, where we are actually, one of the main things that I'm doing is actually hosting a SOAR program as well. So in about a month, ours will happen at the end of March. And really excited for that to happen there and to see what God's going to do in the city of Winnipeg and the teams that come on our SOAR program. So it's always so encouraging for me to hear the stories of transformation that's happening in people's hearts through stuff like that, because it just gives me more energy to put the time in and energy to make that happen. Whoa, my goodness. I'm getting excited here. Man, the SOAR stuff I really enjoy. I just want to stop there just for a second and talk about that. There is something about when we can actually engage mission right where we are at. And oftentimes it's really easy in the busyness of our own lives to just be within this bubble, right? We go to our work, and we go to our schools, and we go to our grocery stores, and we go back into our homes, and we just go to our sports programs or whatever it is. We live within this busyness of all that stuff. And sometimes we miss all the things where our bubbles actually interact with the world around us. And we forget the fact that the kingdom that we are bringing, this thing that we are bearing, the God's kingdom that we are carrying, is interacting all the time with people that we are around in all those spaces. And I love SOAR because one of the things that it does is it expands that bubble into a new thing. It takes us kind of out of the comfort space that we had, and it expands us, and it kind of gets us into a space where we're actually really intentionally thinking, praying, engaging where God is at in a bit larger community. Not too large, not one that we can't travel to all the time, but one that is just a little bit cross-cultural for me, maybe sometimes a little bit uncomfortable going into some of those places. You know, the youth were with the seniors, who I'm guessing they don't usually go hang out with the seniors, but it's another whole culture that you got to hang out with, right? Or going to hang out and sort food or doing all these other things. I know there's groups at the Bridge or all these other ministries, right? So you're just expanding that bubble and bringing the kingdom into some of those places, which I love. This year, SOAR looked at this theme in Romans 12, 1-2, which we'll get to, but really talked about this box and kind of talked through what that box looked like. And I'm going to talk mainly just about the sending of that box. That's really the key piece I'm wanting to focus in on today. And the SOAR program really talks about the grow, know piece, right? And there's understanding who God has made us and how he's formed us and the space and how he's filling us up and all those pieces. But I really want to focus on the go this morning and that sending out. So that actually taking that package, that box that God has formed within your lives, and actually sending it to where it's supposed to go. In our garage, on the shelf, I can picture it in my mind, there is a pair of sandals that have been sitting there. Brand new sandals, never been worn. They've been tried on, never been worn. It was an online purchase, didn't really fit. Went through all the work to register, to return, got the little thing, whatever. But I never went and found a box that was the right size. I never printed out the label. I never took it and carried it back to the store and actually returned these sandals. So those sandals oftentimes sit on that shelf and are this reminder of something that I should have done and just didn't take the effort and energy to finish. Started it, could have got the money back from it. It's now way too late for that, and they just sit there. And I think sometimes it's so easy for us to start a good work and continue to look into some of these things. But how do we actually go to the point where we find the box, we pack it up, we put the label on it, and we actually send it to where we want it to go? My shoe is untied. I'm totally going to trip on this. Just a second. As I get this going, I will continue to share. That's a first for me. Our mission journey has had a lot of steps through it. And there's a whole bunch of pieces where I can definitely see God at work in each one of those steps. It started for me when I was probably about 15 years old, and we were in Regina. I was at Parliament Community Church, and we had our Mission Sunday, so something very much like this. And Randy Friesen, who at the time was the director of MB Mission, and which is now Multiply, was there sharing stories about just the amazing ways that God was working as he was engaging mission. And man, at 15, I was like, that is what I'm doing. I'm gonna dedicate my life to being on mission. That sounds so exciting, all these stories. And I was on this trajectory and path, and that path really began with the idea of adventure. Missions is exciting and adventurous. I get to experience new cultures and new people and engage new ways and travel and all these sort of things. That was the original call. It kind of spurred me in to some of those things. And I've kind of seen how my call has continued to evolve or morph or change, or God is continuing a transformational work inside my own heart in those things. It was while I was in youth that our youth then had a mission trip to Healing Hearts, which is very much similar to the Bridge, and we're connecting with a kids camp there and serving there, which then morphed into us actually coming and hanging out with those kids every Wednesday at their drop-in, and just really engaging that community and really enjoying being able to serve. There was this thing that I had a passion to be able to serve those that were in need. And I really enjoyed it with our youth group. We had fun together with that, but this idea of being able to serve started to grow inside me. Maybe it was the adventure that kind of spurred me on, and now it's this real understanding and hunger to be able to serve. And that's what kind of spurred me and Ruth on into, I did my engineering degree here in Saskatoon, and Ruth did her nursing degree, and we were all ready to use these gifts to be able to serve the Lord in the ways that we could. And through some of that process, the next step started to form for us was this idea of relationships, and just how amazing it was to get to know somebody and to get to be able to walk in discipleship with somebody and to be able to dive in the Word together and to be able to see them starting to see who God was in their own life and the kingdom coming for them in those ways, which became a whole nother new exciting piece. I remember me and Ruth actually finishing our engineering and nursing degrees and saying, God, we've dedicated our life, we're going on missions, that's the part we know, we just have no clue how to do that. We don't know at all. So we actually, which was back here at the time, there was the 24/7 prayer week that was going on. In this room was the prayer room, and so me and Ruth had signed up for our hour. We were in there praying. We were also praying for the community, but we were also praying that God would lead us to what he had next for us. We had done these steps, we'd completed these ones. What was God leading us to next? And it was after that prayer thing, we walked down the hall, and in the end there, Dwayne and a few other pastors were there meeting with Randy Friesen, again, this guy who was in the story from the beginning. And Randy calls us in, or these guys call us in because they say, hey, we've been meeting with Randy. We know your heart for missions. Come, you should meet him. And so we meet Randy, and really quickly that forms into many more things, which God continued to spur and move and do things. But I just loved how in that moment of prayer, that God was just so real in the way that he showed up. Like in a moment where we had no clue what to do with it, but we kind of just laid it down for God to be able to do what he wanted with it. And he just and it doesn't always happen that fast, and that is hard, but this one did, and it was so exciting to see that moment happen. And that really started to spur something within me and Ruth, this idea of prayer, and how God was just so active and real in those spaces. And you heard the testimonies here of how those times of prayer were so impactful for this team, in the way that God spoke and encouraged these people, and just in the way that we just have loved to be able to engage in prayer throughout our ministry. Man, all these different things that have just continued to stir and change and transform as we've gone. Ruth has always had a heart for orphans and widows. That has always been one of Ruth's main call. We went to Turkey, and that was just not on the table. Like, we tried to open some of those doors. We tried to push them and figure out ways into those things, and it just didn't happen. We now have 3 foster kids at home, and I would say we did not know what we were getting into when we opened that door. They are awesome kids. We kind of thought, hey, let's kind of engage, see what this is going to look like, whatever. Somebody will come for a little while. This has now been, we have 3 kids. 2 of them have been with us for over almost 6 years now, and the one, since he was born, he's almost 3. So it's been a great journey, but being able to care for a community of brokenness and being able to invite them in. So this whole idea of broken people that we engage with has been another piece that has now stirred us in our journey with mission and what that's looked like. Okay, before I keep going into these, I'm going to have to jump into Romans, at least here, so you guys can hear this. Okay, so it says, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is in his good and pleasing perfect will. There's a lot of moments through what I thought was my original call. Like this, I was going to go on an adventure, or I was going to go and just be able to serve, and just God continue to morph and change and transform and renew the things in my mind through this process. It was this act, though, of being able to take all of ourselves. You know, it says here to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. Your wholeness, your whole self, everything about you, and offering it into that space, which hasn't always been an easy. I'm not going to paint an easy picture with that, and there has been a lot of stuff, and that is probably what has led to another piece of our own story, which has been a lot of hard stuff and broken moments, and moments where we really question where you are in the midst of that. Like, we know these moments where we came and God, you showed up in prayer immediately, and it was really clear and known in that moment. And then there are moments where I'm sitting in this brokenness and this grief, and I'm like, why? Why did you do this? Like, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. And God continuing, maybe a slower work in some of those or whatever it is, but continuing to bring transformation and beauty and his kingdom again into some of those spaces. But coming to this place of understanding as we're transformed in our minds, where we can come to this place of understanding God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. That space of where he's calling us into and what he's actually asking us to be able to engage. I think one of the things that I'm at now and I'm really enjoying with mission and engaging with right now is shepherding moments of transformation. Like you see that with SOAR a lot, because you take an intense time where you are really focusing, and it's like we often say it's like a laser beam. You're taking this laser beam and you're focusing really heavily into what God is doing in your life, and then spreading that out to people around you. So you're like, we don't live in the laser beam all the time, right? We're often living at this light bulb type thing that kind of spreads the light all around. But like SOAR is a laser beam moment where you are just really intentionally seeking after the Lord, spending a lot of time in that, in community, discipleship, all these pieces coming together and seeking after stuff together in those moments. And I love it. Like just hearing even the testimonies this morning, those moments where God transformed something in their life. And it didn't become about the fact that I'm following rules. It didn't become the fact that I traditionally come every Sunday morning to church, or it didn't become about all the things that I should be doing. It came all of a sudden about that, man, God spoke to me really clearly, and I love him, and I want to serve him because he is now so real in my life, and I'm passionate about it. And so that's where I'm at in this space now. I love those moments, like traveling to Turkey with these guys and spending time with them and seeing what God was stirring in their life, stirring up those things, those moments of where God is at work. That box sometimes doesn't get sent, and it sometimes still sits on that shelf, and it sometimes feels like it's too late or whatever it is for that. But I encourage you to engage it again, and encourage you to maybe step into whatever that is that God is stirring up in you. And it could be any one of those pieces. Like there's a lot of pieces that that's my story of what God has done in me, right? Those different pieces of brokenness, or those different pieces of calling me into adventure, or calling me into serving, or whatever it is. And I don't know what that moment is for each one of you, but I know that God is calling each one of us, because we are all bearers of the kingdom, to continue to engage in the communities that we are in, and maybe even stepping outside of those communities sometime, but being able to take the stuff that God is doing within your life, so filling that box up with all the stuff that God is doing in you, and being able to actually send that off and actually share that really clearly to those people that are around you. Sometimes I do a lot of email stuff, and those days get really monotonous and tiresome. I'm not an admin person. I will stand in that foyer and I will talk with people for hours, sometimes to my kids' frustration. But sometimes I feel like I have to do all these emails and all these things. And in the middle of it, just a few weeks ago, I was just like, Lord, this is just too much. Like I'm so tired of this. I just want to be able to engage in ministry again. And it was just after that a neighbor texted me and said, hey, do you have a moment to talk sometime? And we've lived in our neighborhood for about 5 years now, and interact with everybody and get to know people, and they know who we are and our story. And this neighbor just completely just lays it out before me. He's just like, I just want to know. Like I know there's something about you guys. Just you got to tell me what this is. I want to engage spirituality more. I'm hungering for something. I don't know what to do with this. And then we just got to have this conversation. And I just like thank you, Lord, for opening these doors and the ability to be able to send those boxes. And we don't know those moments. And sometimes those moments just show up, and we are just available for them. And sometimes those moments we prepare and get ready for and are engaged in a long-term thing. But what are those things? What are the things that God is actually calling you into to engage your community, or the things that he's stirring up in your own life to be able to share with people around you? Or what's that community that you feel called into to support? Let me pray. Lord, I thank you for West Portal. I thank you for the part that you have used it to play in our own lives and continue to. I thank you for the people here, the ones that continue to bear your presence, the ones that shine your light, the ones that are salt in this community. And Lord, I pray that they would continue to just salt the communities they walk into. That they would continue to shine your light into the places that they enter into. Lord, that you would stir and transform the things in their own lives, that they might be able to see the good and pleasing and perfect will that you have for them. Lord, I pray that you would lead and guide and direct each one of us, even just today or even just this week, into what you have for us, that we might be able to be ambassadors for your kingdom, that we might be able to walk alongside you and be able to share your love with the people around us. And so, Lord, I thank you that you are doing a good work inside us, and I pray that we would pour that out to the community around us. Amen.